You are not here by accident. Something within you, deeper than conscious reasoning, older than any deliberate choice you have ever made, navigated you to this precise moment. Not chance, not coincidence. Something far more intelligent than that. And by the time you have finished receiving everything shared here, you will understand not only why you arrived, but what you were always meant to do with the power that has been inside you this entire time. Perhaps you have spent years doing everything the world told you to do, asking the right questions, praying in the right direction, waiting with the right kind of patience. And still, the life you were promised in return has not arrived. Not because you lacked desire, not because you lacked effort, but because you were never taught the actual operating system behind reality. But what if everything you were taught about how to receive what you want, the asking, the waiting, the begging, was not the path to power, but the very mechanism keeping you from it? What if the most fundamental instruction you received about life was built on a lie so deep it became invisible? Most people will listen to those questions and immediately reach for comfort. They will choose the familiar explanation over the confronting truth. They will scroll past, click away, return to the prison they know. But not you. You are still here. You are still listening. And that already tells you something essential about who you are and what you are ready to receive. Today, across 10 chapters of precise and deeply practical metaphysical training, you are going to discover the operating principles behind conscious creation, the forbidden knowledge that removes the external king from his imaginary throne and returns the sovereign power of reality to the only place it has ever truly resided: inside you. This is not motivation. This is not philosophy. This is the architecture of how existence actually works. And once you understand it, nothing will function the same way again. Throughout our entire lives, we have been instructed to participate in a rigged system. A system where we function as the pawns and invisible forces, destiny, fortune, a distant divinity, serve as the players. We were conditioned to request, to appeal, to wait, to accept the premise that authority resided somewhere beyond ourselves, and that our purpose was to demonstrate sufficient worthiness, patience, or luck for that authority to extend its favor in our direction. This audiobook is an act of defiance against that deception. It is the moment we strip away the veil of powerlessness and expose the forbidden truth that has been concealed beneath it. The truth is that there are no external players. The universe is not a ruler who distributes favors. It is a mirror. And the capacity to shape reality has never existed outside of you. It has always been complete and entirely whole within. This is not a guide for learning to ask more effectively. It is a discipline for ceasing to ask altogether. Within these words, you will not encounter formulas for supplication. You will encounter the operating principles of conscious creation. You will learn to transition from a state of insufficiency to one of certainty, from passivity to deliberate action, from victim to originator. You will uncover the principles of assumption, mental discipline, and aligned movement, not as abstract concepts, but as instruments of absolute sovereignty. The knowledge you are about to receive carries the label of forbidden for one precise reason. It returns all responsibility to you, and therefore all power. The question is not whether you are prepared to receive this knowledge. The question is whether you are prepared to be free. Chapter 1. The Deception of Asking. For as long as collective memory reaches back, human beings have been taught a singular method of engaging with the power of the universe: supplication. We have been informed that desire must be requested. Ask the divine, ask the cosmos, ask destiny itself. We have been trained in the art of petition, of entreaty, of pleading. We kneel, we clasp our hands, we lower our eyes, and from a place of profound insufficiency, we project our desires outward into the void, trusting that some external, benevolent intelligence will notice our sincerity and grant us what we long for. We have constructed entire religious systems and self-improvement philosophies upon this foundation, and we have spent our existences in an endless cycle of asking, waiting, and, in the vast majority of cases, experiencing the hollow frustration of silence in return. The first and most confronting of the forbidden truths is this: the act of asking is the direct cause of your not receiving. This is not a paradox. It is the precise physics of consciousness in operation. The psychology of supplication functions as a mechanism for affirming lack. To comprehend why asking constitutes an act of self-undermining, we must first examine the state of consciousness from which it originates. No individual asks for something they already sense they possess. The impulse to ask arises inevitably from a consciousness rooted in insufficiency. When you ask, you perform a powerful ritual of lack confirmation. Every supplication is a declaration transmitted simultaneously to the universe and, more critically, to your own subconscious architecture. The underlying communication is always consistent. This is not mine. I do not possess it. I exist in separation from my desire, and I lack the capacity to obtain it independently. Which is precisely why I require an external force to intervene on my behalf. This orientation immediately positions you as subordinate. You become the one who begs, and the universe becomes the authority who decides. You become the effect, and the external world becomes the originating cause. It is the voluntary surrender of your own sovereignty. Consider the act of desiring abundance. You close your eyes and say, "Universe, please bring me more prosperity." What is the field of infinite potential actually receiving? It does not register the literal words. It receives the music, the vibrational signature beneath the language. And the vibration being transmitted is that of apprehension, of anxiety, of the fundamental belief that what exists is insufficient. And the universe, functioning as a flawless mirror, has no alternative but to reflect your inner state back to you. It returns more of the experience of not having enough. It presents unexpected expenses, vanishing opportunities, additional evidence to confirm your need, and additional reasons to ask again. This is the recurring cycle in which the overwhelming majority of humanity finds itself entrapped. They experience insufficiency, so they ask. The act of asking amplifies the sensation of insufficiency. The universe reflects that insufficiency, and upon perceiving the reflection, they conclude that the only available solution is to ask with greater intensity, with more fervor, without recognizing that each new supplication deepens the very condition they are attempting to escape. The physics of absence explain precisely why the universe appears to disregard appeals. The universe is not a conscious entity with auditory capacity for your spoken words. It is an impersonal field of energy that operates according to the law of resonance. It does not decode your language, but it comprehends your vibrational frequency with absolute precision. Your emotional state, as we are beginning to understand, is a frequency. The sensation of yearning, of craving, of need is a low-frequency vibration, a frequency of contraction. The reality of your fulfilled desire, abundance, connection, vitality, is a high-frequency vibration, an expansion frequency. These two states occupy completely different positions on the energetic spectrum. You cannot tune a receiving instrument to one frequency and expect to intercept the signal of another. It is a physical impossibility. When you petition from a position of need, you are calibrating your internal instrument to the frequency of scarcity. From that calibration, the only experiences available to you are experiences of scarcity. To receive the signal of abundance, you must first adjust the dial. You must, in some manner, begin vibrating at the frequency of abundance before its external evidence has materialized in your physical experience. Your subconscious architecture, your connection to the field, operates under this same governing law. It does not respond to the logical content of your words, but to the depth of conviction in your feeling. Asking is a confession of uncertainty. It is an admission that you do not genuinely believe your desire belongs to you. And the subconscious, upon receiving this signal of doubt, cannot proceed with the construction process. No architect can complete a structure when the client interrupts every 5 minutes with reservations about whether they truly want it or can sustain it. The act of asking, therefore, creates a short circuit within the manifestation process. It is the act of projecting an image into the mirror while simultaneously announcing to the mirror that the image has no reality. Why, then, is this framework of supplication so deeply embedded in our collective experience? Because the belief in an external authority who distributes favor represents the cornerstone of the architecture of powerlessness. Throughout history, those who understood the mechanics of social control recognized that the most reliable method of governing large numbers of people is convincing them that power exists outside of themselves. If you can persuade individuals that they are fundamentally unworthy, that they are subject to the dictates of fate, that they require an intermediary, a priest, a guide, an institution, to communicate with the source of all power, you have constructed a perfect system of dependency. The truly forbidden knowledge, the great metaphysical revelation, is not a superior formula for more effective asking. It is the disclosure that there is no one to ask. The power is not out there, it is in here. The truth is that you are not a subject within the domain of a distant divinity. You are a cell within the consciousness of creation itself, and as such, you carry direct and inherent access to every capacity that consciousness possesses. You do not need to request. You need only remember who you are and begin functioning from that remembrance. This is the transition from victim consciousness to creator consciousness. The victim asks, the creator decrees. The victim waits, the creator assumes. The victim appeals, the creator receives. And through the course of this audiobook, you will learn to make that transition completely. We will not offer you a refined manual of enhanced petitions. We will offer you the operational architecture of your own sovereign creative capacity. The question that emerges naturally, with an almost existential urgency, is this: if we do not ask, then what precisely do we do? Do we resign ourselves to passive acceptance? Do we abandon all expectation of transformation? The answer is the precise opposite. We cease asking and we begin claiming. This is the quantum shift from victim consciousness to creator consciousness. It is the movement from the one who appeals to the one who governs. The one who appeals kneels, extends an open hand, and requests the universe for sustenance. His power is projected outward. The sovereign stands upright, roots himself at the center of his domain, and declares the law of his own existence. His power radiates from his own being. A decree is not an act of arrogance. It is not a command issued from a place of ego seeking dominance. A decree, in its most essential form, is a serene and aligned declaration of a truth that already exists on the plane of consciousness. It is the act of giving voice to an invisible reality so that it can find expression in the visible world. When you cease asking, you cease confirming lack. When you decree, you are claiming wholeness. You are transforming your identity. You are no longer the person who requires wealth. You become the person who is wealth. You are no longer the individual who searches for love. You become the living embodiment of love itself. This is the fundamental distinction. Supplication asks the mirror to alter its reflection. The decree changes the face that appears before the mirror. At the heart of this sovereign practice stand the two most powerful words in human language, the master command of creation: I am. In mystical traditions across cultures and centuries, I am represents the sacred declaration of pure existence, of first cause. When you speak these words, you are not simply identifying a characteristic of your personality. You are invoking your own creative nature. You are declaring your unity with the originating source of all power. Your subconscious architecture, that faithful and completely literal servant, accepts whatever follows I am as a direct command regarding your identity. And its singular function is to shape your body, your behavior, and the circumstances of your life to correspond precisely with that decreed identity. Most of us have wielded this power against ourselves throughout our entire lives. I am so disorganized. I am a financial catastrophe. I am always depleted. Each of these phrases represents a declaration, a command, that, repeated with genuine conviction, has constructed the very reality we find ourselves lamenting. The first act of mastery is to become a guardian of these two words. To refuse to place anything after I am that does not express your highest understanding of who you truly are. The practitioner transforms their inner language. Instead of requesting, "Universe, please bring me greater prosperity," they center themselves and declare, "I am a magnet for abundance and prosperity. Resources flow toward me through channels both expected and completely unexpected." Instead of expressing wishes for connection, they declare, "I am the embodiment of love and wholeness, and I naturally attract relationships that reflect my own inner harmony." Instead of seeking healing, they affirm, "I am the perfect expression of vitality. Every aspect of my being knows and demonstrates its original wholeness." This is not manipulation of language. It is a fundamental repositioning of cause. You are ceasing to exist as an effect that reacts to life and becoming the originating cause that creates it. The practitioner does not leave this transformation to chance. They cultivate it with deliberate and sustained practice in the workshop of their own consciousness. The first practice is the examination of the habit of petitioning. To liberate oneself from a conditioned pattern, one must first render it visible. For 1 week, the practitioner becomes a quiet observer of their own inner language. Without judgment, they record every moment their mind enters supplication mode. I wish I had. I desperately need. I hope this happens. At the conclusion of the week, reviewing this record reveals with striking clarity how frequently authority has been surrendered and lack has been reinforced. Once the language of supplication has been identified, the practitioner begins the work of linguistic transformation. Each asking phrase is rewritten as a claiming phrase, as an I am decree. I wish my efforts were recognized becomes I am a valuable contributor and my work is acknowledged and rewarded generously. I need to find a way through this situation becomes I am the source of wisdom and ingenuity. The perfect answer already exists within me and reveals itself with ease. This practice creates a new vocabulary of power, a personal collection of declarations to draw upon when retraining the inner dialogue. Finally, the practitioner understands that the decree must be embodied, not merely spoken. The most transformative practice is to act from the assumption. They ask themselves, if I were already the person who has received everything they desire, how would they move through this space? How would they speak? How would they make even the smallest decisions? And then they begin to function from that certainty, not as performance, but as genuine rehearsal for the reality they are constructing. They move with the posture of confidence. They speak with the calm of someone who already knows. They make decisions from abundance rather than apprehension. This act of embodiment is the most potent signal available to the subconscious. It communicates not through language, but through the totality of being, that the old pattern is complete. A new reality has begun. The fraud of supplication has been revealed. The door of the powerlessness prison stands open. You have understood that the universe does not respond to appeals, but to sovereignty. Not to need, but to certainty. If these first truths have already begun shifting something real in the way you understand your own power, leave the number 11 in the comments below. In numerology and across ancient systems of sacred knowledge, 11 is the number of awakening, the signal that a doorway has opened and a new level of perception has become available. If something in you just recognized itself in these words, 11 is your marker. Leave it below and let this community witness the moment your awakening began. Chapter 2. The Universe as a Mirror. We arrive now at the second and most illuminating of the metaphysical principles. The universe is a mirror. This is not a poetic expression crafted for aesthetic effect. It is perhaps the most precise description available of the actual mechanics underlying reality. The law known across ancient traditions as the principle of correspondence states that your external world, your vitality, your relationships, is not a solid, independent entity existing apart from you. It is a reflection, a flawless, unfiltered, and completely honest reflection of your dominant state of consciousness. Imagine yourself inside a perfectly darkened room. In your hands, you hold a projector of infinite capacity. The content within that projector is the accumulated total of your habitual beliefs, recurring thoughts, and dominant emotional states. When you activate the projector, that content is transmitted and cast upon the blank, neutral surfaces of the room, which represent the infinite field of potential that is the universe. What you observe on those surfaces is not the room itself. It is the content you are transmitting. If the content is a narrative of struggle and scarcity, the surfaces of your life will be populated with images of conflict and insufficiency. If the content is an epic of expansion and abundance, those same surfaces will mirror that story with equal precision. The vast majority of people spend their entire existences attempting to alter the content by arguing with the surface. They complain about the images. They fight against them. They attempt to paint over them from the exterior, without recognizing that the only way to change the reflection is to enter the projection room and transform the content being transmitted from within. The world is not doing anything to you. It is showing you with relentless accuracy what you are currently projecting. Your life is not something that happens to you. It is a feedback mechanism. It is the echo of the song you are composing in the silence of your deepest self. To genuinely understand how this mirror operates, we must examine it across the three primary dimensions of human experience. The first dimension is the mental plane, the reflection of your beliefs. Your inner world at the cognitive level is composed of your beliefs and your dominant patterns of thought. This is the content running within the projector of your mind. The external world reflects this content with perfect faithfulness, expressing itself as the recurring themes and recurring situations that populate your life. Consider the patterns that seem to repeat in your experience, often featuring entirely different individuals but carrying an identical underlying script. Perhaps there is a pattern of feeling unseen. You change environments, you change relationships, but in each one you find yourself overlooked, undervalued, bypassed when opportunity arrives. Perhaps there is a pattern of approaching the edge of significant achievement only to have something intervene at the critical moment, redirecting you back to familiar ground. These are not destinies, they are reflections. They are the visible expression of a root belief, a subconscious program operating beneath the level of conscious awareness. The person who perpetually feels unseen probably carries the deep belief that their contributions are insufficient. The person who consistently approaches the threshold of success and retreats likely harbors an unconscious apprehension about what visibility would actually demand of them. The conscious practitioner, when confronted with one of these recurring patterns, does not respond with the frustrated question, "Why is this happening to me again?" They respond with genuine curiosity. What belief in me remains so active and so embedded as to project this same narrative across every new circumstance? The external pattern is not the confinement. The confinement is the internal belief. And the pattern is simply the mechanism that reveals with precise and ultimately compassionate accuracy where the original instruction resides. The second dimension is the emotional plane, the reflection of your vibrational frequency. Your habitual emotional state is arguably the most influential aspect of your inner world. The universe functions as a resonance field. It draws to you whatever vibrates at a corresponding frequency. The reflection of your emotional state materializes in the texture of your relationships and the overall atmosphere of your life experience. If you inhabit a state of unexpressed frustration or accumulated resentment, you will consistently attract individuals and circumstances that activate exactly that frequency. The world will continue providing justification for the emotion you are broadcasting, because that emotion is the signal you are transmitting. If you move through life in a state of persistent anxiety, you will experience the world as an inherently threatening environment. The mirror will present you with unsettling information, unreliable people, and an unending supply of reasons to remain in vigilance. Conversely, and this is the transformative dimension of this understanding, when you deliberately cultivate a state of internal steadiness, you will begin to notice a shift that can appear almost inexplicable. The people around you will seem different. The situations that previously generated tension will begin to lose their power. The world has not changed. You have changed the frequency of your internal receiver, and you are now intercepting an entirely different signal. A foundational practice for the awakening practitioner is the vibrational examination. Pausing multiple times throughout the day to honestly assess the emotional frequency currently being transmitted. Is this a frequency of expansion or of contraction? This simple awareness creates the capacity for real-time recalibration. The third dimension is the physical plane, the reflection of your embodiment. The mirror of correspondence ultimately expresses itself in the most tangible dimension of experience. Your vitality and your material circumstances are the densest reflections of your inner state. Your body is your most intimate mirror. A sustained inner state of relentless self-criticism, unresolved guilt, or chronic resentment translates into a body chemistry of prolonged activation. And that chemistry, maintained over time, expresses itself physically as muscular tension, inflammation, a diminished immune response, and eventually as illness. A physical symptom is not an adversary. It is the visible echo of an emotional signal that has not yet been received and addressed. Your material circumstances function with equal fidelity as a mirror of your beliefs around abundance and your sense of deserving. The scarcity visible in your external experience is not the fundamental problem. It is the symptom. The originating condition is the impoverishment of consciousness within. It is the belief that you are undeserving, that prosperity requires suffering, that receiving is in some way selfish. The external world simply confirms the story you are projecting. The work of the conscious alchemist, therefore, is never performed on the exterior surface. Attempting to clean a mark on the mirror produces nothing of lasting value. The real work is to address the mark on your own face. When you alter the originating cause, the inner state, the effect, the outer reflection must change in response. It is not optional, it is inevitable. The awakening practitioner transforms their relationship with external experience. They cease to be a fighter and become instead a diagnostician. When confronted with an unwanted reflection, they do not lament and they do not assign blame. They withdraw to the quiet workshop of their own consciousness and begin the work of honest self-examination. They ask themselves, if this external circumstance is a perfect mirror, what is it revealing about my own inner script? This is the alchemical shift. The turning point for the conscious creator occurs at the moment they make the radical decision to redirect their attention away from the reflection, away from the external world and toward the only location where genuine change is possible, the source of the image itself, their own inner state. The practitioner understands that their singular responsibility is not to alter anything in the external world. Their responsibility is to change the content being projected from within, to polish the lens of their own perception. And they carry an unshakable understanding that if this inner work is performed with honesty and persistence, the mirror, by the governing law of correspondence, will have no choice but to reflect a new reality. The mirror is not a judge. It is our greatest teacher, our most honest partner in the process of creation. It does not exist to punish. It exists to reveal. It shows us, without exception and without distortion, precisely where our genuine work resides. A foundational practice in the workshop of reflection mastery is what might be called the correspondence journal. At the close of each day, or when confronted with a particularly challenging circumstance, the practitioner takes their journal, not to register complaints about what has occurred, but to decipher what the experience is communicating. They describe the external event with the neutrality of a scientist, and then they pose the essential question: if this external situation were a precise mirror of my current inner state, what belief, what emotional pattern, what unconscious story within me would it be reflecting? Consider someone whose consistent external reflection involves a lack of acknowledgement in their professional environment. In their journal, they do not write, "My colleagues are ungrateful." They write the external reflection with precision. "I completed significant work this period and received no recognition." Then the examination begins. What is the internal originating cause of this reflection? Perhaps it mirrors my own embedded belief that my contributions are not genuinely valuable. Perhaps it reflects my own reluctance to recognize my own worth, and the universe is simply showing me what I have been declining to show myself. Perhaps it reflects an unconscious preference for remaining beneath the threshold of visibility, and I am consequently attracting circumstances that honor that preference. This practice of sincere self-inquiry is the first movement in identifying the content that needs to change. Once the internal image requiring transformation has been identified, the practitioner engages what might be called the as-if protocol. They dedicate themselves to embodying the inner state that corresponds to the external experience they desire. They do not wait for the reflection to shift before they allow themselves to feel differently. They feel differently so that the reflection will shift. If they desire acknowledgement, they do not petition for it. They enter their mental workshop and deliberately inhabit the inner state of someone whose value is recognized and confirmed. For a concentrated period each day, they cultivate the genuine feeling of already being seen, already being competent, already being fully appreciated. They move as that person moves. They speak as that person speaks. They inhabit the calm and the quiet security of that identity within their own body. They are constructing the internal cause, the new content that the mirror will eventually reflect. Finally, the practitioner learns to interpret every small reflection throughout their day as a form of communication. The world ceases to be a series of random occurrences and becomes a continuous and meaningful dialogue. When someone demonstrates unexpected kindness, the practitioner does not dismiss it as coincidence. They recognize it as a reflection of the kindness they have been cultivating within themselves, and they express gratitude to the mirror. When they encounter a frustrating setback, they do not label it as misfortune. They receive it as an invitation from the mirror to examine whatever frustration or internal resistance may currently be active within them. Every moment becomes an opportunity to calibrate the content being projected. You are no longer subject to the world. You are its originating source. Here is your invitation. If the principle of the universe as mirror has shifted the way you understand the events currently appearing in your life, leave the number 777 in the comments below. In countless ancient traditions and modern numerological systems, 777 carries the signature of alignment, the recognition that the inner and the outer are beginning to correspond. 3 sevens, 3 levels of reflection, mental, emotional, physical, all moving into resonance. If something in your current life is beginning to make a new kind of sense through this lens, 777 is your signal. Leave it below. Chapter 3. The Field of All Possibilities. Our daily experience presents us with a world of apparently solid and clearly separate objects. We place a hand on a surface and perceive solidity and permanence. We observe our physical form and identify it as a distinct and bounded entity. We operate from the assumption that reality is composed of things. This is the foundational perspective of classical mechanistic science, a universe that functions as an intricate and predictable mechanism, objective, sequential, and fundamentally material in nature. This view, while extraordinarily useful for building infrastructure and launching vehicles into space, is an approximation. It is a surface-level perception of something vastly more mysterious, comparable to evaluating an ocean by examining only the foam that forms at the outermost edge of its surface. At the opening of the 20th century, a collection of pioneering scientists equipped with extraordinary courage and insatiable curiosity chose to look beneath that surface. They ventured into the subatomic realm, into the interior of the atom itself, and what they encountered permanently dismantled our inherited understanding of reality. They discovered that the atom, the supposed fundamental unit of matter, is nearly entirely composed of empty space, and that the particles within it, electrons, protons, the more fundamental quarks, were not, as previously assumed, small and solid spherical objects. They were not things at all in any conventional sense. They sometimes behaved as localized particles and sometimes as distributed waves. They possessed no fixed position until the act of observation was performed. The foundational disclosure of quantum physics is this: the universe is not composed of matter, it is composed of energy. And that energy is not static or fixed. It is a vibrant, dynamic field of pure potential. The apparent solidity we perceive is an impression generated by the velocity of vibrational activity, in the same way that the blades of a rapidly spinning fan appear to form a continuous solid disk. You do not inhabit a universe of fixed objects. You inhabit an ocean of energy in constant motion. Physicists call this ocean the quantum field, or the unified field. Across the entire span of human history, mystics and sages have offered it different names: the ether, the infinite mind, the womb of all creation. The name is less important than the concept. This field is the primordial substance from which everything that has existed, currently exists, or will exist has emerged. It is a field of infinite possibility. It contains, as latent potential, every conceivable reality simultaneously. The possibility of illness and the possibility of complete restoration coexist within it as two waves. The possibility of material scarcity and the possibility of extraordinary abundance coexist within the same field. The version of you that experiences life as a perpetual struggle and the version of you that creates with effortless mastery both exist right now as vibrational potentials within this ocean of existence. The universe is not a single fixed narrative. It is an infinite library containing every possible story. But if all possibilities already coexist in this field, what determines which of them becomes your three-dimensional lived experience? What transforms a probability wave into a concrete particle of experience? Here we encounter the most disorienting and simultaneously the most empowering discovery in the entire history of science: the observer effect. The now famous double-slit experiment demonstrated this principle beyond any reasonable challenge. When physicists directed electrons at a barrier without observing which path they traveled, the electrons behaved as waves, creating an interference pattern characteristic of distributed wave activity. They existed in a state of pure probability. But the moment a detector was activated to register which slit they passed through, the behavior of reality changed instantaneously. The electrons ceased their wave behavior and became defined, localized particles, creating a completely different pattern on the detection surface. The implication of this is so profound that it continues to disturb the most carefully constructed assumptions about the nature of existence. The simple act of consciousness, the act of observation, is not a passive act. It is a creative act. Consciousness does not merely perceive a pre-existing reality. It participates in the construction of that reality. It is the factor that collapses the infinite potential of the field into a specific, definable experience. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler called this a participatory universe. The universe, he proposed, does not exist as something separate and independent from the beings who observe it. We are inextricably woven into the fabric of what we perceive. We are simultaneously the shapers and the shaped. This is not a laboratory curiosity confined to the subatomic scale. It is the operating law governing your personal life in this present moment. The universe of your individual experience is a quantum field of infinite possibility. And your consciousness, operating through the lens of your beliefs and the frequency of your emotional state, is the observing instrument that continuously collapses those possibilities into the reality you inhabit and call your life. When you begin your day with the habitual thought, "Today will be difficult," you are functioning as the detector in the double-slit scenario. You are directing the focused beam of your consciousness, carrying the charge of that belief toward the probability wave associated with difficulty. And the quantum field, which makes no moral judgments, responds to your observation. It collapses that potential into your experienced reality. Your perceptual filter then operates throughout the day to present you with every confirmation of your original observational act. When, by contrast, you begin your day and deliberately, regardless of current circumstances, choose to direct your observation toward the probability of flow, of unexpected opportunity, of synchronicity. The field responds to that observation with equal impersonality. It begins collapsing a corresponding reality into your experience. You are not engaging in wishful thinking. You are performing a precise act of quantum selection. You are choosing a reality from the infinite available menu of possibilities through the focused, intentional direction of your consciousness. The final and most liberating understanding of this dimension is this: you are not separate from the field. You are the field. Your body is not a fixed material object. It is an extraordinarily complex and dynamic field of vibrating energy, a galaxy of billions of interacting particles in constant motion. And this personal field does not terminate at the boundary of your skin. It radiates outward in all directions, continuously interacting with the larger, encompassing field. You are not an observer looking at an ocean from a distant shore. You are a wave within the ocean. You are a focal point of consciousness within the field, experiencing itself and sculpting reality from the interior outward. If your internal state is characterized by disorder and apprehension, your personal field transmits an incoherent signal. And that incoherence is mirrored in your external experience as chaos and unpredictability. If your internal state is characterized by genuine peace and clarity, your personal field transmits a harmonious signal. And that harmony is reflected in your external experience as synchronicity and ordered progress. The practitioner who truly internalizes this understanding cultivates three fundamental arts for the deliberate shaping of the quantum field. The first is the art of deliberate observation. The master creator understands that attention is the instrument through which reality is collapsed. They refuse to allow that instrument to wander unguided, randomly illuminating the probabilities of scarcity and limitation. They direct it with the precision of a skilled surgeon. The practice begins each morning in stillness. The practitioner does not begin their day by reacting to the world they observe. They begin their day by deciding, in advance, which version of the world they will choose to observe. Before external demands arrive, they activate the light of their consciousness and perform what might be called the daily blueprint. Not a list of tasks, but an act of perceptual declaration. They describe in present tense language the reality they are choosing to collapse into experience that day. Today, I am discovering evidence of abundance in every direction I choose to look. I am observing and selecting a reality of creative movement and unexpected clarity. I am perceiving harmony in the relationships around me and genuine vitality within my physical form. This is not an exercise in fantasy. It is an act of deliberate command. It is the director providing initial instructions to the creative intelligence of the field, calibrating the perceptual filter before the day's experiences arrive. The second art is vibrational tuning. The practitioner understands that observation must be charged with genuine feeling to be fully effective. The field does not respond to a cold and analytical gaze. It responds to the signal of an activated heart. Emotion is the intensity of the light you are projecting. The essential practice here is what might be called the heart coherence ritual. Several times throughout the day, the practitioner takes 5 focused minutes to recalibrate their vibrational signal. They close their eyes, direct their attention to the center of their chest, and breathe slowly and rhythmically, imagining that the breath moves directly through the heart space. While breathing, they deliberately evoke an elevated emotional frequency, and the most powerful of these frequencies, the one that carries within it the signature of genuine creation, is gratitude. Not thought gratitude, felt gratitude. They retrieve a memory of deep appreciation and allow the warmth of that feeling to expand through their entire body. By combining coherent breathing with an elevated emotional state, they are transforming their emitted signal from incoherent noise into a precise and harmonious wave, one that the quantum field can recognize and respond to. The third art is surrender to the field. After establishing deliberate observation and achieving genuine vibrational coherence, the practitioner performs the most paradoxical and ultimately the most powerful act available to them. They release control. They surrender to the intelligence of the field. The conscious mind, with its linear logic and its dependence on previously observed information, is a limited instrument for orchestrating the complexity of manifestation. Attempting to control exactly how and precisely when a desired outcome will materialize is the equivalent of a single water molecule attempting to direct the movement of an entire ocean current. Surrender is not passivity. It is the supreme expression of trust. It is the transfer of responsibility from the limited conscious mind to the infinite intelligence of the quantum field. After their intention practice, the practitioner visualizes their desire as a sphere of radiant light, feels its reality, and then, with a long exhalation, releases it. They hand it over to the intelligence of the universe with complete and genuine confidence, acknowledging internally, "It is done. I trust the process entirely. I am open to receiving this, or something even more perfectly aligned, through whatever path serves the highest good." By releasing the anxious grip of control, they dissolve the resistance that was impeding the manifestation and create an opening that the intelligence of the field will inevitably rush to fill, frequently through pathways far more elegant than the conscious mind could have designed. Chapter 4. The Currency of Creation. The State of Being. Our culture has conditioned us to believe that the primary currency of creation is action. If you want something, pursue it with relentless effort. We have built an entire civilization of doers, people who measure the quality of their results by the quantity of their exertion. But as we have already begun to perceive, this represents an incomplete truth. A truth operating from a lower tier of understanding. You have encountered people who work with extraordinary dedication and barely sustain themselves, and others who appear to attract remarkable outcomes with what seems like effortless ease. Clearly, action alone cannot function as the originating cause. The metaphysical principle that restructures everything is this: the primary currency of the universe is not what you do, it is what you are. The currency of genuine creation is your state of being. A state of being is not a momentary emotion, a brief flash of happiness, or a passing surge of frustration. It is not a fleeting thought. A state of being, or state of consciousness, is your vibrational home. It is your emotional and psychological center of gravity. It is the accumulated total of your dominant beliefs and feelings. The underlying emotional tone that accompanies you throughout the arc of each day and to which, by conditioned habit, you consistently return. A state is a dwelling of consciousness. You can visit the state of inner peace during a moment of meditation. But if your habitual dwelling is the state of underlying anxiety, you will inevitably return to it. A state is an assumed identity. It is not simply something you experience in a given moment. It is something you inhabit and become within that moment. To understand it with precision, we can examine a state through its three primary components. The first is root beliefs, the invisible foundations of the state. These are the fundamental assumptions about yourself and the nature of the world that you hold as unexamined truths. The victim state, for example, is constructed upon beliefs such as, life inherently withholds from me, people consistently disappoint or harm me, and I have no genuine power to alter my circumstances. The second component is dominant feelings, the walls and ceiling of the dwelling. These are the emotional textures that permeate the state at every level. The victim state feels like resentment, self-pity, persistent frustration, and the experience of powerlessness. The third component is imagined scenes, the content that is continuously projected within that dwelling to reinforce its reality. A person residing in the victim state replays in their inner theater an unending loop of past injustices and rehearses anticipated future betrayals. Imagine these states as distinct territories on the map of consciousness. There is the territory of scarcity, with its atmosphere of anxiety and its landscapes of perpetual insufficiency. There is the territory of genuine gratitude, with its atmosphere of peace and its landscapes of recognized beauty. There is the territory of resentment, with its corrosive atmosphere and its bitter inhabitants. You are not your actions. You are the state you habitually occupy. You are the resident of whichever territory you have, consciously or unconsciously, chosen to call home. The governing law of reflection states that your outer world is a mirror of your inner world. We can now refine that law with greater precision. Your outer world is a mirror specifically of your dominant state of being. The mechanism is vibrational resonance. Your state of being functions as a tuning instrument vibrating at a specific and constant frequency. The quantum field, the universe, which is the ocean of all possible frequencies, cannot avoid resonating with your signal. It draws to you, through an impersonal law of physics, the people, the circumstances, and the events that vibrate at a corresponding frequency. If you inhabit the state of anxiety, your instrument is transmitting a frequency of disorder and anticipation of threat. The universe, upon receiving this signal, will reflect back the situations that justify that anxiety, setbacks, conflicts, unsettling information appearing at every turn. If you inhabit the state of genuine confidence, your instrument transmits a frequency of calm, faith and settled security. The universe responds by reflecting situations that confirm that confidence. Synchronicities, unexpected solutions, fortunate encounters that appear at precisely the right moment. This is the precise location where the limitations of isolated action become undeniable. Action is secondary. Two individuals can perform the exact same external action, but if they perform it from opposing internal states, they will produce radically different outcomes. Consider two people making an identical outreach call. The first person makes that call from the state of scarcity. Their underlying belief is that they need this particular outcome to survive the current situation. Their emotional state is anxiety. Their inner theater is replaying scenes of rejection. Even if their spoken words are polished and precise, the vibrational signature of need and fear travels through everything and is perceived at a subconscious level by whoever is on the other end, who registers an inexplicable but real sense of discomfort and pulls back. The second person makes the same call with the same language, but from the state of genuine abundance. Their belief is that they are present to offer something of real value, and if the other person perceives that value, wonderful. If not, the field of possibility remains infinite. Their emotional state is one of calm, detachment, and authentic service. Their vibrational signature of settled confidence is genuinely magnetic. The other person feels this quality and moves toward engagement. The action was identical. The state was entirely different. The result reflected that difference completely. A state is not something that occurs to us by accident, like a change in weather conditions. It is something that, consciously or without awareness, we select each morning upon waking. Think of your pure awareness, your deepest self, as a formless actor of infinite potential. And consider each state, the victim state, the creator state, the scarcity state, the abundance state, as a complete costume in a vast and boundless wardrobe. Each costume arrives with its own script, its own characteristic movements, its own way of speaking and perceiving. The difficulty is that most of us have lived as actors who forgot they were acting. At the earliest stages of life, we were handed a costume, often a worn version of the same costume worn by those who raised us, and we put it on without any awareness that a choice was being made. Perhaps it was the garment of persistent worry, or the garment of continuous struggle, or the garment of fundamental inadequacy. And we have worn this same costume for so many years that we have entirely forgotten it is a costume. We have come to believe it is our actual skin. When we attempt to change our lives exclusively through action, we are in essence asking an actor dressed in the heavy cloak of the victim to convincingly portray a scene of sovereignty and triumph. The performance is forced. The gestures carry no authentic conviction. The voice lacks the resonance of genuine truth. The audience, which is the universe, is not deceived. It responds to the reality of the garment, not the performance being attempted within it. The genuine transformation, the real shift, does not occur by changing actions. It occurs in the dressing room of the soul. It occurs when you develop the courage to remove the old, frayed costume that no longer serves you, to stand unguarded for a moment in the vulnerability of the threshold between identities, and to deliberately select a new garment from your infinite wardrobe, because here is one of the most liberating understandings in all of metaphysics. You do not need to construct a new state. All possible states already exist. Your consciousness is already a vast and infinite wardrobe containing the fully crafted costume of every imaginable state of being. The costume of the person who moves through life with genuine abundance, with its fabric of settled security and its details of authentic freedom. The costume of the person who creates with inspired clarity. The costume of the person who loves and is loved from a place of genuine wholeness. Every possible human state of being exists already as a potentiality in universal consciousness. Your creative will does not reside in the capacity to manufacture new costumes. It resides in your capacity to choose which costume you are going to inhabit. The process of transformation is, therefore, not an act of laborious construction, but an act of conscious selection. You examine your current life. You honestly identify the worn costume you have been carrying out of sheer habit, perhaps the costume of scarcity. Then you enter your inner wardrobe. You locate the costume you intend to inhabit, the costume of genuine abundance. And through the twin instruments of imagination and assumption, you remove the old one and step into the new. This process can be genuinely challenging. The familiar costume has been worn for decades. There is a quality of comfort in familiar misery, the comfort of the known. Removing a garment you have worn for 40 years can feel like removing your own skin. There is a threshold moment where you exist between identities, no longer entirely the old self, not yet fully the new. This is the boundary that most individuals do not cross. But if you persist, if you continue inhabiting your new garment in the theater of your imagination until the new state begins to feel natural, until it begins to feel more like home than the old one ever did, a transition occurs. The new state becomes your actual dwelling, and the external world, your faithful mirror, begins reflecting the people, the experiences, and the possibilities that correspond to the new and genuine identity you have chosen to inhabit. The practitioner does not leave this process to chance. They engage it with deliberate and sustained practice. The first practice is what might be called conscious undressing. The practitioner understands that a new garment cannot be worn authentically over an old and dirty one. The first act is removal. This begins with the practice of honest, non-judgmental self-observation. The practitioner becomes aware of the old costume they have been carrying, without fighting it, without shaming themselves for having worn it. They simply observe its qualities. They notice its texture and its weight. This act of loving, clear awareness is what begins to loosen the garment, what creates the space for it to be genuinely released. Once in the stillness of genuine self-awareness, the practitioner enters what might be called the imaginal fitting room to select their new identity. This is the practice of visualization not as daydream, but as the genuine trying on of a new self. They do not observe the costume of confidence from a distance. They step into it in their imagination. They feel its qualities on their body. They walk through the fitting room inhabiting the sensation, familiarizing themselves with what this state actually feels like from the inside, until the garment begins to feel genuinely theirs. Finally, once the selection has been made, the practitioner carries that new identity out into the world, even while the mirror of their current reality still reflects the old image. And here begins the most essential practice of all: persistence in the new identity through the discipline of a strict mental diet. The mental diet is the practice of refusing, with each act of will, to return to the old garment. When doubt arises, when fear presents itself, when the temptation to retreat into familiar patterns becomes strong, the practitioner does not comply. They return, deliberately and patiently, to the feeling and the texture of the identity they have chosen. The power to shape your reality is not the capacity to construct an entirely new destiny from nothing. It is the understanding that every possible destiny already exists within the wardrobe of your consciousness. Your life is an extraordinary and ongoing act of creation. And the principle at the center of that creation is this: you are the only one with the capacity to choose which costume you wear. Stop inhabiting the garment of powerlessness that was placed on you without your genuine consent. Enter your inner wardrobe and dress with the authority of the Creator you have always been. The number 520 appears across multiple ancient and modern systems as the frequency of transformation, the precise numerical signature of the moment when one form of being ends and another genuinely begins. If reading these words, something in you has genuinely begun to shift, if you can sense the old garment beginning to loosen, leave 520 in the comments below. Let this community witness the moment your transformation stopped being something you hoped for and became something you chose. Chapter 5. The First Secret: The Power of Assumption. This is perhaps the most direct, most elegant, and most consistently misunderstood technique in all of metaphysics. Its power is so immediate and so complete that the logical mind, conditioned by decades of operating within the paradigm of effort and earned merit, frequently resists it. To assume is not to wait for something to arrive. To assume is not to hold a wish. To assume is not to practice the surface-level repetition of optimistic thoughts. To assume is the radical and sovereign act of accepting your desire as an already accomplished reality in the only location where reality is actually created: your own consciousness. It is the art of feeling and inhabiting your inner world from the perspective of the completed outcome. It is the act of offering your subconscious not an image of a future desire, but the genuine sensation of a present memory. The untrained mind operates within the constraints of its 5 senses. It believes that reality consists of whatever can be seen, heard, and touched. It exists within a perceptual prison defined by external evidence. If the senses report scarcity, the mind accepts scarcity as its fundamental truth. The practitioner in metaphysical knowledge learns to perform a profound inversion of this process. They learn to be loyal not to the evidence of their senses, which represents only a reflection of the past, but to the truth of their imagination, which is the originating cause of the future. The first and most common barrier the student of this principle encounters is the voice of internal criticism that announces, "But this is not real. I am pretending. I am not actually prosperous. How can I genuinely feel prosperous?" This objection arises from a misunderstanding of the nature of reality itself. What is real? What are the actual facts? The facts reported by the senses, which are only ever reflecting the accumulated choices of previous consciousness, or the facts of the causal realm of consciousness, which is the originating source of all that the senses will eventually report. When you assume the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you are not engaging in deception. You are performing the most genuinely truthful act available to you. You are being loyal to the reality you have selected on the causal plane. You are declaring your allegiance to the invisible over the visible. It is an act of faith, not in an external divinity, but in the creative capacity of your own consciousness. The method actor provides a clarifying parallel. A skilled method actor preparing to portray a king does not simply memorize dialogue and apply a costume. They engage in deep interior work. They locate within their own psychological architecture the qualities of genuine authority, of responsibility, of sovereign steadiness. And then they inhabit those qualities. They begin to think with the king's patterns, to feel with the king's orientation, to move through space with the king's quality of presence. They immerse themselves so completely in the assumption of that identity that, for the duration of their inhabitation, the distinction between actor and role effectively dissolves. The performance carries genuine magnetism as a result. Your work as a creator follows precisely this model. You do not force a performance of the qualities you desire to embody. In the stillness of your inner world, you locate the seed of those qualities that already exists within you, and you deliberately cultivate them. You ask yourself, how would genuine confidence feel within this body? And then you embody that feeling, not as performance, but as authentic rehearsal. You do not pretend to be someone for whom abundance is natural. You assume the state of that person. You inhabit the calm, the ease, and the quiet generosity that characterize that state. The fundamental point is that you are not attempting to deceive the universe. You are convincing yourself, your own deep subconscious architecture. And once the subconscious accepts your new state as your actual identity, the expression of that identity in the external world becomes both inevitable and automatic. Your subconscious is a perfect and entirely literal servant. It carries no capacity for ironic interpretation or for distinguishing between what is imagined and what is externally observed. Its singular function is to take the belief, the assumption you hold as genuine truth, and organize your experience to match it. If you persistently assume and genuinely feel the state of anxiety, your subconscious will accept that as its directive, and arrange a reality that continuously provides justification for anxiety. If you persistently assume and genuinely feel the state of gratitude, your subconscious will accept that directive and organize reality to provide continuous reasons for gratitude. Assumption is the cause. The reflection in the mirror of your life is the effect. There is no mechanism by which this law can fail. The only point of potential failure is in the practitioner's inability to persist in the assumption with genuine feeling. The precise mechanics of effective assumption depend on one crucial distinction that is consistently overlooked: the difference between third-person visualization and first-person assumption. Third-person visualization is the act of watching a scene that features yourself. You observe your avatar from an external vantage point, receiving the outcome you desire, achieving the goal, inhabiting the life you envision. This practice can serve as inspiration, but it contains a fundamental limitation. It maintains the separation between the one who desires and the one who possesses. You remain in the position of the observer, which is still, at its core, the position of the one who has not yet arrived. First-person assumption is entirely different in quality. You are not observing a scene. You are inside the scene. You are not watching the experience. You are the one having it. You are not imagining yourself holding something. You are feeling it in your hands, its weight, its texture, its reality. You are not picturing yourself in a particular environment. You are perceiving that environment through your own eyes, hearing its sounds with your own ears, feeling the atmosphere of it on your own skin. This complete immersion in the first-person perspective is what communicates most powerfully to the subconscious. Because when you experience a scene in the first person with full sensory engagement, your nervous system cannot reliably distinguish it from a physical event. For your neurological architecture, the vividly imagined experience and the externally observed event are encoded in the same manner. You have created a memory of the future. The practitioner also understands which scene to construct. The most potent and most naturally sustainable scene is not the moment of achievement itself, which often carries a charge of excitement that is difficult to maintain in the drowsy, receptive state that makes this practice most effective. The most powerful scene is the one that follows naturally from the achievement. The quiet moment of settled normalcy that implies the desire is already a fact of life. If the desire involves restored health, the scene is not the moment of receiving good news from a physician. It is the quiet conversation with someone you love later that same evening, where you say with a sigh of genuine relief, "It's remarkable to feel this well again." If the desire involves material abundance, the scene is not a dramatic moment of sudden windfall. It is the ordinary act, 1 week later, of paying a bill with complete ease and without any emotional charge, because financial pressure has simply ceased to be a defining feature of your experience. The practitioner becomes a methodical director and authentic actor of their own inner work. The first essential practice is what might be called writing the sensory script. Before entering the theater of the mind, the practitioner takes their journal and answers, with the precision of a skilled screenwriter, the creator's essential questions. What is the simplest, most natural scene that would imply my desire is already a lived reality? What would I observe through my own eyes in that scene? What sounds would I hear? What physical sensations would I experience? And above all, what is the dominant emotional quality, the background feeling that permeates that scene as its constant atmosphere? The second and most consequential practice is the nightly rehearsal. The practitioner understands that the most powerful portal for assumption is the hypnagogic state, that threshold of drowsy awareness between waking and sleep, where the analytical guardian of the logical mind gradually lowers its vigilance. Each night, they arrange themselves comfortably, allow their body to release its tension completely, and once they sense that analytical reasoning is beginning to soften, the real work begins. They enter their scene in full first-person immersion. They feel the surface they are seated on in their new office. They hear the specific tone of a friend's voice expressing genuine congratulation. They feel the warmth of the light in the environment of their envisioned life. And they allow this brief scene, this memory of the future, to replay in a gentle, passive, unhurried loop. Not with force, not with grasping, with a drowsy, accepting familiarity. Their intention is not to manufacture anything, but to become so genuinely acquainted with the feeling of this new reality that the feeling itself completely saturates their consciousness. And then they allow sleep to arrive in the midst of that feeling. They cross the threshold of sleep from within their wish fulfilled, within their new home, their new state of being. This act of impregnating the subconscious architecture in the moments immediately preceding sleep is among the most potent acts of conscious creation available to a human being. You are handing your faithful servant the completed blueprint at the precise beginning of the hours in which they perform their most intensive work of building your world. Chapter 6. The second secret. The mental diet. You have traveled in the theater of your mind to the state of your desire fulfilled. You have dressed that state in the texture of sensory reality and saturated it with the genuine feeling of completion. You have allowed yourself to cross the threshold of sleep from within your new home. And then your eyes open, and the mirror of the world, relentless in its honesty, returns to you the reflection of your previous reality. The bank account displays the same figures. The physical situation has not visibly shifted. The empty place in your life remains empty. Your five senses rise as a chorus of detractors, announcing with collective insistence that your imaginative act was nothing more than a pleasant and temporary self-deception. It is precisely in this moment, in the apparent space between your transformed inner world and your unchanged outer world, that the most important battle of conscious creation is waged. This is the test of genuine faith. This is where the dreamer surrenders to the evidence of the senses, and where the creator persists beyond it. And to persist with integrity, the creator must master the second metaphysical principle, the discipline of the mental diet. If assumption is the act of planting the seed with deliberate intention, the mental diet is the art of tending the soil during the gestation period. It is the discipline that protects the delicate new creation from being overtaken by the weeds of habitual old programming. To understand the genuine necessity of a mental diet, we must first honestly recognize the nature of the primary challenge. And the challenge is not the external world. It is our own deeply conditioned dependence on the testimony of our five senses. We have been trained from the earliest moments of our lives to accept that reality consists of what can be seen, heard, touched, sensed. Our perceptual instruments have been appointed as the arbiters of truth. They present us with a world of apparently fixed and unalterable facts. The fact is that your resources are limited. The fact is that you are alone. The fact is that your body is struggling. The practitioner in metaphysical knowledge arrives at a radical understanding. The senses do not report on present reality. They report on the past. What your senses perceive today is not a declaration about your present moment or your future trajectory. It is simply the reflection, the visible harvest, of the states of consciousness you inhabited in previous days, weeks, and months. Examining your current material circumstances to determine your abundance is comparable to examining last autumn's harvest to predict the yield of the coming spring. The mental diet is the practice of interrupting this habitual hypnosis. It is the conscious commitment to be more deeply loyal to the truth of your inner world, to the new seed you have deliberately planted, than to the shadow currently visible in the outer world. It is an act of genuine faith in the unchangeable law of creation. Your assumption, if genuinely persisted in, must express itself. It is not a matter of hope. It is a matter of law. It is crucial to understand precisely what the mental diet is not, in order to practice it with integrity. It is not the application of surface-level optimism. It is not the act of forcing a cheerful expression while your interior experience is screaming in the opposite direction. It is not the denial of your current circumstances. It is the denial of their authority to determine your permanent future. It is the recognition of them as temporary reflections, not as immutable truths. And it is absolutely not the suppression of thought. You cannot not think a thought by attempting to avoid it. The effort to suppress a negative thought by force is analogous to holding a buoyant object under water. It demands immense continuous effort, and the moment your attention relaxes, the object rises to the surface with even greater force than before. Engaging in active combat with a thought amplifies it by lending it your energy. What the mental diet genuinely is the practice of selective attention. It is the art of the skilled gardener. The gardener does not spend their days in argument with the weeds. They simply, with a calm and disciplined consistency, each time they notice a weed, redirect their attention from it and return it to the plant they are cultivating. The feeling of their desire fulfilled. The mental diet is a practice of emotional discipline. It is the conscious choice to deny yourself the addictive but ultimately corrosive satisfaction of worry, of complaint, of self-pity. These emotional states are like nourishment that tastes immediately satisfying, but progressively depletes the system that consumes it. And ultimately, the mental diet is an act of unwavering loyalty. It is faithfulness to your inner vision, to your genuine self, in the same manner that a parent remains faithful to the reality of a child growing within them, even long before any visible evidence of that child is available to the outer world. This process is not merely a philosophical position. It is a practice of deliberate neurological change. Your established states of being are neural pathways reinforced by years of consistent mental traffic. Your new assumption represents a small, freshly cleared trail through that established landscape. Every time you permit your mind to re-enter the familiar patterns of doubt or apprehension, you are traveling the established route, reinforcing its depth and making it progressively easier to travel again. Every time you notice that familiar pull and deliberately redirect your attention back to the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you are widening the new trail, making it progressively clearer, progressively more accessible. The visible manifestation in the external world occurs at the tipping point, the moment when the new pathway has become the dominant route. When the new state feels more natural, more genuinely like home than the old one. The first core practice of the mental diet is what might be called the fast of doubt. During the gestation period of a new assumption, the practitioner refuses to continuously survey the external world for evidence that the manifestation is approaching. This anxious searching is itself an expression of doubt. It carries the vibrational signature of not yet arrived. It is the equivalent of digging up a seed every few hours to assess whether it is germinating. The practitioner understands that the only evidence required is the quality of their inner feeling. If they can return at will to the genuine feeling of their desire fulfilled, they have found the only confirmation that actually matters. That internal feeling is the authentic reality. The external world is a lagging reflection that simply requires additional time to catch up. The practitioner, therefore, strategically limits their exposure to the conditions of their old reality during this period, not from a posture of denial, but from the strategic wisdom of protecting a new creation during its most vulnerable phase of development. The second practice is what might be called sovereign indifference. The most potent instrument available against the intrusion of doubt-based thoughts is not active combat. It is calm indifference. When a thought that contradicts your assumption arrives, when a fact from your current reality presents itself at the door of your consciousness, you do not engage it in argument. You do not attempt to reason with it or disprove it. By engaging in any of these ways, you extend your energy toward it and inadvertently increase its influence. Instead, the practitioner treats the intrusive thought with the calm and complete disinterest of someone who has already moved on. They observe it arriving from the distance of their witnessing awareness. They name it without emotion. The familiar thought that this will not work. And then they simply redirect, not with force, not with frustration, with the quiet and sovereign disinterest of someone whose attention has better places to be. They withdraw their focus from the doubt and immediately, deliberately, return it to the feeling of their fulfilled desire. The thought of limitation arrives. The response is not panic, but a settled inner knowing that says, "Noted," while simultaneously feeling the gratitude of someone who already knows their resources are abundant. The third practice is one of the most powerful and transformative techniques available in the entire body of metaphysical knowledge: the art of revision. Despite the most committed practice, life will occasionally present circumstances that knock us out of our desired state. We experience a difficult interaction. We receive unwelcome information. We make a choice we wish we could reconsider. At the close of such a day, we may find ourselves genuinely displaced from the inner state we have been deliberately cultivating. Revision is the practice of entering your mental workshop before sleep and rewriting the scene. The protocol is this: in the drowsy state before sleep, review the events of the day with the eye of an honest but compassionate editor. Identify the specific scene or interaction that displaced you from your chosen state. Then, in your imagination, rewrite it. Replay it precisely as you would have wished it to unfold. If the interaction was characterized by tension or misunderstanding, you rewrite it as a conversation of genuine clarity and mutual respect. You hear the words of understanding. You feel the ease of resolution. If you received unwelcome information, you receive instead the information you desired, and you feel the genuine relief and gratitude of that reception. If you made a choice you regret, you replay yourself making the choice you would be proud of, and you inhabit the feeling of genuine integrity and competence that follows. You replay this revised scene with as much genuine sensory and emotional engagement as you can sustain, until it begins to feel like your authentic memory of what occurred. What does this accomplish at the level of the subconscious? You are replacing a memory of contraction with a memory of expansion. You are clearing the energetic residue of a difficult day and crossing the threshold of sleep, having planted a seed of resolution rather than continuation of conflict. You cannot alter the factual record of the past, but you can alter its influence on your present, and through that alteration, prevent it from becoming the seed of your future. How long must the mental diet be sustained? Until it no longer requires effort. Until the new state has become your actual home, the place your awareness returns to automatically. The moment arrives when you no longer need to deliberately construct the feeling of abundance or of genuine connection. You simply inhabit those states. The old patterns, the old costumes of scarcity or of isolation, begin to feel genuinely alien, like something that belonged to a previous version of your life. This is the state of quiet certainty. This is what Neville Goddard called the Sabbath, the seventh day of creation. You have completed your creative work in the inner world, and you now rest in a settled and absolute faith, knowing that what has been created in the invisible must, by the governing law of creation, appear in the visible. There is nothing further required. Only the serene observation with genuine gratitude as your new reality continues unfolding. Persistence is not a struggle. It is a loyalty. It is faithfulness to your soul's most genuine vision, even when the evidence of the senses continues insisting that the vision has not yet arrived. Chapter 7. The Third Secret: Fertile Silence. For reasons deeply embedded in our cultural conditioning, the word surrender has come to be associated with defeat, with weakness, with the abandonment of aspiration. But in the context of conscious metaphysics, surrender carries a completely different meaning. It is, in fact, the expression of supreme creative power. It is the final transition from the consciousness of the doer, who forces, to the consciousness of the creator, who allows. Surrender in this framework is not passive resignation. It is active trust. It is not the cessation of movement. It is the cessation of force. It is the deliberate decision to release the small, limited, anxious grip of the ego and allow the infinitely greater intelligence of the universal field to orchestrate the outcome through whatever pathways it has access to. Pathways that extend vastly beyond the range of the conscious mind's vision. The greatest obstacle to manifestation, the most reliable impediment that stands between the initiated practitioner and the full expression of their creative power, is the ego's obsessive preoccupation with the how. Once a clear intention has been established, the analytical mind immediately begins its anxious interrogation. But how, precisely, is this going to happen? What are the specific steps? What is the detailed plan? What if the particular path I can currently envision doesn't work? This interrogation is born not from genuine wisdom, but from the deep insecurity of a consciousness that believes it must control everything it cannot currently see. The conscious mind, for all its extraordinary analytical capabilities, is a limited instrument for the orchestration of manifestation. Its only available building materials are the bricks of its past experience. It can only conceive of solutions it has previously encountered, paths it has already traveled. It cannot access the miraculous, the synchronistic, the arrival of precisely the right circumstance from a direction that was entirely invisible from the current vantage point. When you become preoccupied with the how, you are, in effect, communicating to the intelligence of the field, I do not trust your capacity. I am going to confine the infinite ways my desire could find expression to the few worn paths that my limited mind can currently map. This preoccupation with control is rooted in a lack of genuine faith, and as a vibrational signal, it communicates doubt. It is the equivalent of transmitting a clear order to the universe and immediately following it with a countermand. The master of conscious creation understands that their role is to establish the what with complete clarity and to inhabit the why with genuine passion, the feeling of the fulfilled desire, and then to completely and genuinely release the how to the orchestrating wisdom of the field. Surrender is not a state of passive and somewhat bored waiting. It is a state of what might be called fertile silence, a vibrant and receptive stillness, an active patience, a settled expectation. This is the Sabbath, the seventh day. You have performed your creative work in the imagination. You have assumed your desire as a present fact. You have tended the soil of your consciousness through the discipline of the mental diet. And now you enter a state of genuine mental and emotional rest. You rest in faith. You rest in the quiet certainty that what has been created in the invisible world is, at this present moment, moving through the structure of reality toward expression in your visible experience. There is nothing further required on the plane of intention. True faith the kind that genuine fertile silence requires, is a state of being, not merely a position of belief. It is a quiet, absolute knowing that resides at the center of your consciousness. A knowing that exists independently of what the five senses are currently reporting. It is the settled certainty that the law of creation is not subject to exception. Hope says, "I have planted the seed, and I am trusting that the conditions will cooperate so that it can grow." Faith says, "I have planted the seed. The conditions are the law. Growth is therefore inevitable." This quality of faith is not something that arrives fully formed. It is constructed through practice, through conscious and deliberate experimentation. It is strengthened each time a sincere act of assumption finds its corresponding reflection, however small, in the mirror of external experience. Every synchronicity, every meaningful coincidence, every small confirmation that the inner work is translating into outer movement adds another layer of unshakable foundation to the temple of genuine faith. The practitioner cultivates this state through three specific practices. The first is the ritual of handover. The practitioner understands that the ego will not voluntarily release its grip on control. Therefore, they create a formal and deliberate ceremony of power transfer. In their nightly practice, after completing their act of assumption, they visualize their desire as a sphere of radiant and perfect light. They feel its weight, its vibration, its complete reality in their awareness. And then, with an act of genuine humility and genuine trust, they raise their awareness and hand that sphere to the intelligence that operates beyond the reach of their personal consciousness. They say inwardly, "Infinite intelligence, I have completed the work available to me on the plane of conscious intention. I have created the blueprint in the only location where I am able to create it, my own consciousness. I now hand the how and the when entirely to you, with absolute trust in your capacity to orchestrate whatever path serves the most complete expression of this intention." It is released. It is done. This ritual is an act of psychic and emotional power. It provides the ego with a concrete act to perform, the handing over, which satisfies its need to do something definitive. And simultaneously, it trains the practitioner in the genuine experience of release. The second practice is what might be called the synchronicity journal. Once the practitioner has genuinely released control, they do not lapse into passivity. They become an exquisitely attentive and receptive observer. They understand that the intelligence of the field, now that the space created by releasing control is available, will begin transmitting signals. Small and sometimes subtle confirmations that the intention is in active movement. The practitioner notes these in their journal. Meaningful coincidences, an unexpected conversation, a book that opens to a particular passage at a particular moment, a chance encounter that carries unmistakable relevance. They do not overanalyze these signals. They receive them as acknowledgement from the field, as quiet confirmation that the creative process is underway. This practice sustains a state of playful, alive engagement with reality and continues building the foundation of genuine faith. The third practice involves the crucial distinction between what might be called inspired action and forced action. Releasing control does not mean remaining motionless. It means ending the category of action that is born from panic, anxiety, and the compulsive need to force an outcome. Forced action feels heavy, like something that must be pushed against resistance. It feels like obligation. Inspired action, which arrives as the field's response to your released intention, feels entirely different. It feels light. It feels obvious. It arrives with a quality of effortless recognition, emerging from a place of genuine inner calm. A quiet sense of, I should connect with this person. I should go to this particular place. The practitioner learns to wait for this quality of impulse. They spend their days maintaining their inner state of grateful faith, tending the garden of their consciousness. And when the inspired impulse arrives, they act on it immediately and without the hesitation of the analytical mind. They understand that this impulse is the next element of the puzzle that the universal intelligence is placing within their reach, and they honor it accordingly. Chapter 8 through 10. The Complete Alchemy, Wealth, Love, and Reality Itself. The alchemy of wealth begins with a precise understanding. True alchemy has never been about the crude transformation of physical substances for the purpose of material gain. That is the surface-level interpretation. The genuine great work was always symbolic and deeply interior. The lead, in the language of the old alchemists, represented human consciousness in its base and unreformed state. Heavy, reactive, contracted, operating primarily from apprehension. The gold represented consciousness in its elevated expression, creative, light, unified with the originating source of all power. The external transformation of metals was always intended as the visible reflection of an interior transformation that was the actual subject of the work. In precisely the same manner, the alchemy of genuine wealth is not the application of mental techniques to accumulate material resources. It is the profound transmutation of an inner poverty consciousness into an authentic prosperity consciousness. The material abundance that eventually appears in your experience is simply the tangible evidence, the residue, that the inner work has been genuinely completed. Poverty consciousness, in its most fundamental composition, consists of 4 elements. The first is the belief in scarcity, the deep and often unconscious conviction that the universe operates as a fixed-sum system. That if one person receives a large portion of what is available, there is necessarily less remaining for others. This belief transforms life into a competition, generates envy at the success of those around you, and keeps your energetic field in a persistent state of contraction, which is precisely the state from which abundance cannot be received. The second is the experience of unworthiness, the volatile and frequently undetected belief that prosperity is somehow not genuinely deserved. This belief produces a prosperity thermostat set at a low threshold. When external circumstances push the level of abundance above that threshold, the subconscious experiences profound dissonance between the outer reality and the inner identity, and proceeds to engineer a return to the familiar level of insufficiency through whatever means are available. The third is the belief that struggle is the proper and necessary path to prosperity, that genuine results must be purchased with pain, sacrifice, and relentless exertion. This belief creates a deep and pervasive distrust of anything that arrives through ease or through genuine joy. It keeps the practitioner locked in the industrial equation of time exchanged for money, blind to the truth that creation at its most powerful level is an expression not of force, but of genuine alignment. The fourth consists of the four fundamental fears that guard the fortress of poverty consciousness: the fear of losing what might be gained, the fear of the responsibilities that abundance would require, the fear of the judgments of those who observe the change, and the fear that prosperity itself would in some way corrupt or diminish the essential self. Prosperity consciousness, by contrast, perceives abundance as a continuous flow rather than a fixed accumulation. It understands that money, like all forms of energy, must circulate to maintain its vitality. It understands that genuine wealth is not the result of effort alone, but of the consistent delivery of authentic value. And most fundamentally, it holds wealth as a tool rather than as an identity, a resource for the amplification of purpose and genuine contribution rather than as the measure of personal worth. The alchemy of love follows a parallel architecture. We have been conditioned to understand love as something to be located, an external person, circumstance, or feeling that will repair our wounds and provide the completion we feel we lack. This framework transforms love into a transaction, a marketplace where we assess and improve our own attractiveness in order to increase our capacity to purchase the love of the person we desire. From this consciousness, the entire landscape of intimate relating becomes one of strategy, performance, and underlying fear. We become actors wearing masks we believe the other requires us to wear, concealing our genuine vulnerabilities for apprehension that their revelation would confirm our unworthiness and drive the other away. The alchemical truth about love dismantles this entire framework at its foundation. Genuine, lasting love is not something you locate. It is something you become. It is not something you receive from another. It radiates from your own being when you have done the inner work of genuinely cultivating it within yourself. The alchemy of love is not the art of finding the ideal partner. It is the art of becoming a complete and genuinely loving partner to yourself first. The work begins with purification, the release of the accumulated energetic residue of past experiences that have not been fully processed and genuinely forgiven. Every unhealed wound, every unresolved betrayal, every disappointment that has not been completed becomes a filter through which present experience is distorted. Through the practice of genuine forgiveness, not as a moral performance but as a genuine energetic release, the practitioner clears the glass of their perception and prepares it to receive a genuinely new reflection. Then comes the cultivation of authentic self-love, not as vanity, but as the genuine practice of becoming the source of love and validation that was once desperately sought from external sources. And finally comes the assumption of being genuinely loved, inhabiting in the theater of the mind the complete sensory and emotional reality of deep, mutual, wholehearted connection. until that feeling becomes the practitioner's actual vibrational home. When the internal state truly shifts to one of wholeness rather than seeking, the external mirror has no alternative but to reflect individuals and circumstances that correspond to that wholeness. In this culminating state of genuine mastery, the practitioner's focus naturally evolves. They are no longer primarily occupied with the manifestation of specific things, greater material resources, a particular relationship, a specific achievement. Those are the appropriate concerns of the early stages of this work. The mature practitioner arrives at a deeper orientation. Their aspiration is no longer to use the laws of consciousness to decorate their life with desired objects. Their aspiration is to become such, a genuine and pure expression of those laws, that their life naturally and continuously becomes a living work of art. Manifestation ceases to be a goal and becomes what it was always meant to be, a byproduct, the inevitable and effortless expression of a genuinely harmonious inner state. To arrive at this state of grace, 3 final recognitions must be genuinely integrated. The first is the dissolution of the gap between the creator and the created. The practitioner who has genuinely done this work arrives at the understanding that they cannot attract their desire across a gap of separation. They must become it. They do not attract abundance from a place of lack. They become the consciousness of abundance. They do not search for love from a place of emptiness. They become the embodiment of love itself. The desire is not a distant object to be retrieved. It is a quality of universal consciousness seeking to express itself through the practitioner's particular focal point of awareness. The second recognition is the understanding of time as an organizing fiction rather than an absolute constraint. Every possible reality, every possible version of your life does not exist as something that will be created in some distant future. It exists right now as a vibration, as a present potential within the infinite field of consciousness. The past, the present, and what we call the future coexist simultaneously in an eternal now. Your consciousness is the selective instrument, and your life is the continuous sequence of what you choose through your vibrational state to draw into your direct experience from that simultaneously existing totality. When you assume the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you are not constructing something from nothing. You are using your consciousness to tune your vibrational frequency to correspond with a reality that already exists, and thereby drawing it into the 3-dimensional dimension of your lived experience. The third and final recognition is the most complete. The power that creates worlds is not an external law that you employ as a tool. It is not a force beyond you to which you petition. The originating power, the first cause, the only genuine creator, is your own consciousness. Your I am. In the early stages of this work, power is externalized. We attribute outcomes to luck, to fate, to the economy, to the judgments of others. As the practitioner matures in their understanding, they progressively reclaim these projections. First, they recognize that their thoughts influence their experience. Then, that their beliefs generate their thoughts. Then, that their state of being generates their beliefs. And in this final realization, they arrive at the understanding that their pure awareness, their I am, is the originating source of their state of being. They recognize that there is no operating power that exists outside of their own consciousness. They are the power. The kingdom of heaven, as every genuine mystical tradition has attempted to communicate through every available medium, has always been within. The practitioner who has genuinely arrived at this recognition no longer needs an instruction manual. They have become the instruction manual. They no longer search for hidden techniques. They have become the knowledge itself. Their most powerful creative act is no longer a ritual performed at a specific time in a specific manner. Their most powerful creative act is the quality of their ordinary, continuous presence, the silence of their settled faith, the steadiness of their inhabited identity, the gentle and unforced radiance of a consciousness that has remembered, genuinely and completely, who it actually is and always has been. Our journey began by removing a foundational deception, the belief that we were participants in a game governed by forces outside ourselves. We departed from a world of supplication and powerless waiting. And across this entire body of knowledge, we have uncovered the operating principles, not as techniques for manipulating external circumstances, but as the living laws of our own consciousness. You received the 3 master keys, the power of assumption to inhabit your desire from the inside, the discipline of the mental diet to protect and sustain that inhabitation, and the wisdom of fertile silence to allow the intelligence of the field to complete the creative process through whatever pathways serve its fullest expression. The knowledge was never the secret. The revelation was always one of identity. There is no external king in the universe. The throne has always been at the center of your own consciousness. And this entire journey has been your way back to it. Your practice from this point forward is elegantly simple. Each morning, as your awareness returns from sleep, choose. Not from habit, not from the residue of yesterday, but from genuine creative intention. Choose the state you will inhabit. Choose the identity you will wear. Decree the reality you are selecting from the infinite available library of possibilities. And carry that decree not as a performance, but as a genuine and settled knowing. You are not a subject within the kingdom of life. You are, and you always have been, its one true sovereign. Begin living as one. If something within these 10 chapters has genuinely resonated, if you sense that a door has opened that will not close again, leave the number 1111 in the